The talent that you need. You've got all of the top talent there, and you don't need any more people. Anybody out there? Well, this panel has promised that they know the secret. Actually, they're going to share a little bit of their ideas on attracting and retaining, something that, from talking with a lot of you out there, we're all challenged with, whether you're on the private sector or on the public sector, different challenges but different things. So with that said, we'll get started, and I'll ask each of the panel members just to introduce themselves, just a little bit about the program that they're managing, so you've got some context of what they're dealing with. And if you got a fun fact to share about yourself, go for it.
Well, thank you, Guy, and thank you, Influence Group, for pulling us all together again for what is as normal and a very engaging, enlightening, and collaborative event. My name is Ron Bordelon. I'm Chief Facilities Officer for the Louisiana Department of Education Recovery School District. We're a statewide agency tasked with transforming underperforming schools. With respect to the facility discussion today, my team and I are responsible for execution of the $2 billion reconstruction of the school system in Orleans Parish as a result of Hurricane Katrina and the subsequent levee failure. I know it's been a while. It was 2005. I didn't get money until 2012. Just to let everybody know.
It doesn't bode well for Harvey.
To that end, we're proud that we're one of the first state agencies to hit a number of milestones. We're the first state agency to implement a disadvantaged business enterprise program, establishing a goal of 25%. We've dealt over $200 million to local contractors in the Orleans area over the last several years, executed about $1.4 billion in construction activity. So we're certainly very proud of that fact, and we're on target to complete the bulk of the construction activity by 2020. A fun fact about myself, I enjoy Formula One racing, a bit of a motorsports fan, and go to every race I can.
Very good. Flip.
Good morning, I'm Flip Herndon. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Seattle Public Schools for facilities and operations. So in that is construction, facilities, enrollment planning. Currently we're redrawing boundaries for high school and a couple of other things. We're reopening a high school. Security, athletics, child nutrition services, nursing, you name it. So pretty much the operations side. Seattle's experiencing quite a bit of growth. We'll go over some of that a little bit later. Exciting times. We go out for capital levies about every 3 years. Currently we have a little over $1 billion in projects. We'll be going out for another capital levy in February 2019, which will probably be a little bit over $1 billion as well. So fun fact about myself, I have 3 boys. They're all very active. One's a senior in high school, one's a freshman, and one's in 7th grade. So to distract from that, I still do a bit of running. So I probably do about 4 or 5 half marathons a year around different parts of the country.
Aaron?
Hi, I'm Mary Runtz. I'm from Chicago Public Schools. We bond every year. It depends on what our junk status is that year, how much bonding money we have. Last year we had 750. We'll have 300 this year. We're approaching a little bit different on how we do some of our planning right now. We are building a new high school, and we are going to close 5 high schools. So those 5 high schools will feed into this new high school. Rather than go through the exorbitant cost of renovating some of the high schools, it was like $89,000 per child to renovate one of the schools. And so a decision was made, let's build new because of the new teaching methodology. We have about 370 students, 660 million square feet. And the fun fact thing, I hate those things because now you know what, I'm dull, okay? Here I go. I do needlepoint, okay?
It's the most popular one so far.
All right, good morning. My name is Scott Layne. I am the Deputy Superintendent for operations for the Dallas Independent School District. My responsibilities include all things facilities, and in addition to that, transportation, police, and technology. We are currently working on a $1.6 billion bond program that was passed in November of 2015. And you may think 1.6 billion seems like quite a bit of money, but in Dallas, we have over $3 billion of deferred maintenance identified. So our struggle is we just don't have enough money to do what we need to do. Board members pulling from all sides wanting the money for their schools, very political district. I've been in public education. This is my 35th year. Katy Independent School District down in Houston, Midland in West Texas, and Irving for about 25 years, and I've been in Dallas for the past year. I really don't have a fun fact. I guess the only thing I can think of, and I'm the youngest of 9 kids, and it really wasn't that much fun growing up. But people always say, you know, I don't believe you, name your brothers and sisters. Well, Sharon, John, Joe, Bill, Tom, Gary, Pat, Cheryl, and Mink. So it was very easy. So, but anyway, appreciate it. Glad to be here.
And do any of them do needlepoint?
Probably.
Probably.
But we were in the same college, so there's our fun fact.
Fighting Illini graduates right here.
All right. So we had talked a little bit about the challenge these days of attracting new staff, and especially as a district and constraints that you have on you from a public perspective. Flip, why don't you start off? What are you doing to attract staff to go to you rather than to Amazon and all the rest of the folks up there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Seattle, as some of you may know, the last 2 years has been dubbed the crane capital of the country. So currently we have 63 construction cranes in the city of Seattle. Amazon is sucking up a tremendous amount of talent. They themselves are driving a lot of the work that's happening. But Seattle has just been attractive for other companies other than that. Expedia is located there, headquarters also in Seattle. And it is a challenge for us. What we try and sell people on is, you know, these kinds of atmospheres can be a little bit of a boom and bust. And right now we're clearly in a boom, but Seattle has experienced that bust as well. We were in a boom before that housing bubble, and then kind of busted with everybody else during the recession. And now we're back, and so it can be a challenge for us. What we try and sell people on is that if you work for Seattle Public Schools, you have good stability. We plan on building probably for the next 20 years construction, and we'll really need that for a while. So there's some consistency. That's what we tell our construction firms too is, you know, we realize you've got a lot of big projects out there, but we have quite a few firms that stick with us because we're fairly consistent. Our revenue collection off of levies is a little bit different, so we collect annually on the levy instead of all up front on bonds. And we can only build so fast is the other piece. We just don't have space to have an interim site, so we have to kind of either build on site, although a lot of our sites are really tight. I've got schools located on less than 2 acres, which can be a challenge. And the other is that the cost right now is just really high. We budget about $500 per square foot in our budget. So we're kind of up at the top of that piece right now. We do try and have people, bring them in early. We have an apprenticeship program where we're trying to have high school students and introduce them to the business, let them know what's going on, let them know that, you know, there is a future there. And we try and hire some young folks in the capital department as well and let them know that there's room for growth. We have a few what we call relocation planners right now, which is really just a lot of logistics about opening up new schools, working with principals, helping to facilitate moves and making sure the furniture is in place, all the electronics are in place. And that way it gives them some good experience in dealing with the educational side, really listening to principals and staff, and then implementing that. So I think we have 4 of them right now, and they're all under the age of 30. So we're trying to paint a nice future for them to say, this is a place where you can be for a while and you can grow into the positions.
And most of your program management staff is in-house?
Yes, our program management staff is in-house. We end up hiring a few firms for individual projects. But as far as the overall program goes, construction program, that's all managed in-house.
Ron, how are you addressing?
Well, Guy, to Flip's point, speaking to attracting new and younger talent, I think that that's an area where we as an industry, just like many industries, sometimes miss the boat with regard to our external messaging. Everyone in this room, we're all responsible for significant budget values. We have to deal with strategic planning, capital planning, very complex contracts negotiation, contract enforcement, both intergovernmental and external messaging components, dealing with boards, members of the legislature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point where we get schools built along the way. Well, recently I tried to flip that somewhat by saying to the head of a Master of Science in Sustainable Real Estate program at Layne University, by saying, I don't have a specific position for which I'd like to recruit for, but I know that the generation that is entering the workforce, they care about public service, which we can all attest to, and they care about making a difference and doing something that they can be proud of. So stopping short of saying design a specific role for an individual, I made sure that everyone within the university knew all the different segments we touch. To where if someone was not thinking, I want to be in the construction world, the architectural engineering, facility world, operations, but perhaps they want to be in intergovernmental relations, or perhaps they want to deal with the community, or perhaps they just want to work somewhere where they know they're truly making a difference. I think we did a better job than we had in the past of messaging that externally, and we've got some great results. I was able to recruit several interns, 2 of whom turned into full-time employees, another of whom I was able to put together with a large engineering firm who serves as our primary program manager. And I've generally received consistent feedback along the way, along the lines of, I didn't realize that the world you live in touched so many different sectors. And if you just step back and you think about it, we touch a little bit of everything. I mean, there's very little we don't. Insurance, on and on and on. So that as a strategy has started to work for us. I have a tagline. I like to say, some of you, my friends out here who have heard me before, I'd like to say I operate a highly entrepreneurial real estate development firm embedded within a highly bureaucratic state agency. and I know
You're not going to fix the latter?
I'm not going to fix it. But in a way, we can flip the script and use that as an advantage to get the up-and-coming young person who doesn't quite know what they want to do and embrace what they've always been told, which is try a lot of different things. Don't hesitate to jump from job to job to job every year. I know we all see that's happening, certainly with younger generations. So build that inherently within your own departments. And it's an easier sell to HR than you'd imagine, saying that you have an internship or you have a role and you're not quite sure where it's going to be, but I know I need help everywhere. And if I could take the burden off of one sector, that allows me to focus on this other. So that is one approach that has worked for us.
Very good. Mary, you've had like some financial challenges over the last few years and things, and so how are you tracking these and with that in mind?
We went through a big downturn in my department about 2 years ago, so we're about 30 people now. So we rely heavily on our program management team. And so there's a couple things we do. One, we nurture people on the PMO team, and then we try to hire them. That's kind of underhanded, but that's what we do. And then we're out networking, and then we get recommendations. We have interns, and we find that we give them a lot of opportunities, which I think is great, because when you're young, you need that, but they like to go out and see the private sector. Some come back, some don't. So I think what we offer is that we offer a variety of things to do, a variety of things to learn, and we're at a very high speed all the time. So if you like putting out fires, if that's your personality, we attract those kind of people. And our staff stays with us for a long time because of the variety of work. And I found with younger people that if you let them experience the variety of work, they become dedicated to you. And that's how we've had our retention with the younger people.
Scott?
Well, a couple of things. You know, I kind of look at our positions. As I said, this is my 35th year in public education, and you always hear it said about teachers that it's a calling, and I truly believe, at least that's what it is for me, and that's what we try to preach to people, you know, that we try and hire, that it truly is a career. I was in Irving School District for 25 years prior to coming to Dallas last year, and to give you a perspective, Irving's about 35,000 kids, and Dallas is 157,000 kids. So good friends, you know, I'm old enough to retire. I could have walked away. People call and say, why in the world are you going over there? Why are you going to deal with that mess? Because it truly has been a mess for a long time. And, well, the answer is I can make a bigger difference. I can make a bigger impact on more kids, and that's what my whole career has been about. You know, I'm a firm believer that the learning environment does have a direct correlation to learning. And our superintendent is the exact opposite. He said, no, kids can learn anywhere. And it isn't necessarily about the environment. And I told him, I said, well, put a kid in a classroom that's 95 degrees and put a kid in a classroom that's 70 degrees, and you tell me who learns better. And so in terms of retention or recruitment, a couple of things that we struggle with. Obviously, the economy is very good in Dallas. We actually have 87 cranes in the area, so we have more cranes than you.
Now, in fairness, Texas is pretty big.
But it is a struggle because the economy is so good. And in Dallas School District, I have a staff of 37 people in the bond program, but we also utilize 3 program management firms. So, you know, as we try and recruit people, it's, you know, the problem is they're paid out of bond funds. So the biggest fear is when the bond funds are gone, I'm out of a job. But if you look at the history of Dallas, we're so big. We did a bond program, $1 billion in 02, $1 billion in 08, $1.6 billion in 15, and we're already talking about doing another one. So there is stability if we can convince people of that. The other challenge is the program management firms. They have people, and they can pay more. They can pay more than public school districts, and so we struggle there. And they can actually provide more stability in that they can move their people around to other school districts. So we continue, you know, right now our management staff sits at about 7% of the overall costs, including the program managers. And we hope to be able in time to reduce that down to a 2 to 3% level, not to necessarily save the money, but be able to redirect the money back into our schools. So the other thing we've done too is at our high schools, we've actually started an apprenticeship program because so many kids, you know, even though everyone would like to believe every kid's going to go to college, a lot of kids, they don't want to go to college. So let's not put them on a path to go to college and then they fail. So we've tried to develop construction programs to where they can serve as interns or apprentices to us, whether it's on the professional side or the contractor side, and be able to give those kids jobs right out of high school. So that's very important to us as well.
So you mentioned pay scale, and that's something that comes up a lot. You actually were successful in getting your board to look at a different pay scale than everywhere else. Can you share anything how you did that in order to be more competitive?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, school districts, typically you have an HR or human capital management department. They set pay scales for all employees in the district. In reality, what you pay a director of purchasing, that's going to be less than what you're going to pay a director of planning or a director of construction. But unfortunately, what happens is they all get lumped into the same pay scale. So we worked, as we struggled to hire people, we worked with the HCM department to set separate pay scales for construction, set separate pay scales for technology, so that we could attract the talent we needed to attract. It isn't that easy though, because the people that are on those other pay scales, they don't like it at all. So, but you've just got to understand, it's not necessarily about the market in public education, it's the market in the industry that we have to gear towards.
Have any of the rest of you done anything on the pay that your district's willing to pay?
Well, to Scott's point regarding the difference in industry classification, I think that is something that needs to be hammered home. While we're in the realm of education, we're closer to construction program management than anything else. And it is true that there can certainly be some inter-office issues when approaching it that way, but it is necessary when you look at the skill sets necessary and who we are competing with. There has to be a push to separate our industry within education, to make those understand of the skill sets necessary to accomplish our goals. And also to your point regarding losing funding, that is always a consideration. My particular program, our construction activity, we project to be complete in 2020. So I've been fortunate that over the last 5 years I've been able to have a very stable team, and I'm going to endeavor to keep that team stable over the next 3 years. Hard to do when there is a sunset. Of course, my approach has been one of more of over-communication than anything else, letting them know that there will be a path forward for them, that this office will support them in what they want to do the next time. They don't need to be clandestine in any way, that they're perhaps looking for other opportunities. We welcome it. Let's just do it in a strategic manner.
So that's a great segue. It's one thing to attract them, and then it's another thing to retain the top talent. And you're in a situation, you finally got your funding in 2012 for Katrina. You've got a pretty good team, but Harvey's hit, we've got Puerto Rico, all these other things. How are you going to keep those people from going to those other opportunities?
Well, that certainly will be a challenge from the disaster management perspective. I mean, I know our friends in Houston and Florida and Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands are all in a very desperate way right now, and those who have expertise in the disaster management function will certainly be very attractive to those operating programs in that area. I think the best way to hang on to someone is really, it starts with the recruitment. It starts with that level of commitment and getting buy-in with respect to the noble mission of whatever the particular program is, and then seeing it through. I'm hopeful, and I do believe, and I've had these discussions with members of my team, that while there may be more money available, that is certainly something short-term, as opposed to sticking with a program that you were part of creating. I'd like to say that anyone who's part of my program, they can go 6 blocks in any direction for the rest of their lives within the city of New Orleans and be able to see a project that they were a part of. And they could stop, they could get out of the car, and they can watch the children enjoying themselves in a beautiful facility, in a great learning environment, and that we're truly helping to change the next generation of New Orleanian. While there are many noble functions that need to happen in other areas, I believe sticking with a program, having that personal commitment to it, has a higher level of reward for that individual. So that is something internally that I'm focusing on in my case.
Mary, you mentioned mission as well as being so important to get everybody bought into that. Anything to add on the retention?
Yes, and I agree. It's the mission that we do, and I think all of you relate to it, because you wouldn't be working with school districts and politics if you didn't have a mission or a calling. I found out since we struggled till just recently. It was very difficult to keep people on track because they were worried about the job because of the big riff we had 2 years ago. And one of the things I made sure that we did is that we communicated with people weekly about all the politics that was going around them, to take it away, to take all that crazy noise that was going around, because it didn't impact us. It was just everybody was worried. You know, we have an organization of 40,000 people. There's a lot of gossip. So it was about communication was the thing that kept people on track. They felt that there was an open door, and I think when you're struggling, that's probably the best thing that you can do to maintain your staff and get through the difficult period.
Flip?
Yeah, I think one of the other things we're trying to do is exemplifies some innovation. So you saw a little bit of that last night. You heard last night about innovative schools and what places might look like. And one of those examples, that picture you saw last night from Mindshift of the wall that had all of the plants on it, that's one of our buildings, Hazel Wolf K8. And so people get really excited when they see their buildings used as examples. We also have in Seattle, we try and learn, obviously, not just from school buildings. The Bullet Building, has anyone heard about the Bullet Building? It's actually a building that won the Living Building Challenge. So it is totally self-sufficient. It takes all the rainwater off of the roof, recycles that, and uses that as the water inside. It composts everything out of the restrooms, not the greatest topic, but they have these huge bins that collect everything, and then they go through and they take all that compost and sell it to farms. The entire roof of the building is panels, solar panels. So it produces all its own energy, which in Seattle you wouldn't think the solar panels would power the whole building, but it does. So we've actually been there and taken a look inside. Inside the building, it has a lot of automation that happens in there. And then downtown, Amazon is completing these giant glass globes, which are going to be these atriums. It's about a city block. There are these huge glass globes that are part of their ever-expanding portfolio of buildings. So the innovation that's happening right now in this kind of area, I think, is something that also attracts them. They see that and they get excited about being involved in projects that can make a difference and really look for change.
Scott?
Well, I would say retention isn't nearly as difficult as recruitment. I mean, if we can get them, we do a pretty good job of keeping them. The problem is getting them in. And, you know, it's not just with construction, but anyone you hire, you make them a part of the organization. You provide them with, you know, the ability to get certifications, registrations, get them involved in professional associations, make them feel like they're a part of the family. And I know when I went to Dallas, because the construction program is actually paid out of the bond program, they were almost treated as a separate entity. You know, they can't do anything else unless it's bond, because it's illegal to let them do any other projects in the district if it's not funded by the bond program. Well, you're basically ostracizing that entire group from the rest of the school district. So we've worked with legal to free that up a little bit and allow them to be more of the team. So we've got a ways to go, but we're making progress. And you know, we have 3 program management firms. They're all in-house. So we even try and make them feel like they're a part of the district. So long way to go yet.
Well, and I think that's something you mentioned too, Ron, was that your perspective was not just retaining your in-house staff, but kind of retaining your whole program staff, be it the program manager or there, and you were doing some things with the consultant to try to do that, as well as maybe even push the envelope in things like comp time and things.
That's correct, Guy. Immediately after the disasters that we talked about previously occurred, I went to my PMCM contractors, the JV of 2 PMCM firms, one international, one regional, and I sat down with the JV board and I told them, it's like, guys, I've been very reasonable and forthright with all of you for the last 5 years, and now it's time for you to figure out a way to hang on to talent. And if it means digging into your pocket a little bit, so be it. And don't think about giving me a contract amendment for it. In the private sector, obviously, they have a little more flexibility in what they can do. They're offering a number of new and innovative incentive packages to do just that. They likely would not be doing that if I hadn't sat them down and clearly articulated my expectations to them. Certainly there's going to be turnover. There'll be churn in any organization. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. But in my case, as I'm working through the latter half of a program, I know that the state does not want to be put in a position where we lose that institutional knowledge. I'm on my 5th contract with the same PMCM firm, and I plan to finish the program strong with them. Internally, I have a situation with a tax credit expert, if you will, and for those of you who are following the federal budgets, in the House version, new market tax credits, federal historic tax credits, and private activity bonds were all excluded. In the Senate version introduced last week, private activity bonds are back in, new market tax credits are in for a finite period, and the historic tax credit went from 20% to 10%. I have 2 projects that are in the pipeline, under construction now. I plan to close first quarter of next year, all in around $90 million between the 2 projects. And I've been informed by bond counsel that I can hedge against these changes if I close before the end of the year. Well, there's a couple of holidays, I understand, before the end of the year. I know that because my secretary put it on my calendar. That's the only reason I know. And we're in a position where I'll get likely State Bond Commission approval on the 21st, and then between the 21st and the 31st, I need to figure out a way to get this closed. So I really need my team to step up at this time. So what I did was I met with HR, I dug into some of the state compensation laws, and I was able to find a way to offer someone at the executive director level a comp time option that is separate and apart from the comp time that we normally have, which is in a particular pay period. So I extended a little bit of internal and political capital to do that, but it was necessary to achieve the outcome. I know I want to protect the state's interest, and I need my close team to help me do that. Regardless of what happens, I believe we'll succeed, but by that extra effort, I believe what I've done is I've solidified this individual likely through the end of the program, because she saw exactly what I was willing to go through to keep her there out of respect for her loyalty to that point. It really does boil down to loyalty in my mind, and sometimes I think that gets lost in the discussion, but loyalty, it needs to work both ways.
My first career was in the Navy, and I was taught from day one to take care of your troops and they'll take care of you, and I hear some of that same thing there.
Trust is hard to build and easy to lose.
There you go. Mary, Flip, Scott, anything else to add to the retention piece here? Any other tricks you've got up your sleeve? No, okay. But it was a good thought that you had for a second.
I'm going to take the opportunity to tout the education portion of CPS. We're in the top 4% of increasing our goal of graduating children. In 2009, I think we had a 54% graduation rate. We are on track to have an 81% graduation rate. So it goes to, our buildings suck. We have a $3.4 billion deferred maintenance. So I can't win the argument that it's always the environment for good education. You know, they've done well. They started tracking, and we're very proud of it, and it's across the board. And it's been proven by Stanford. Somebody did some measurements for us. So we're just not touting ourselves.
So you got an expert to tout.
Yeah.
So
Fudge the numbers. We've done that.
Scott, you did have some ideas, kind of taking this, now you've got the talent, you've attracted, retained, and then constant pressure to do more with less. And you had some things when you came in of what you did to kind of stretch those bond dollars.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a presentation this afternoon, and I'll touch on it a little bit more. But when I went to Dallas, $1.6 billion bond program, over $3 billion in deferred maintenance. We were operating, the bond issue was based on a report that was done by the Parsons Company, and it was basically a life cycle report. And it was very obvious as we got into the bond program, there just wasn't enough money. You know, things weren't identified correct. Well, they were identified correctly. It just wasn't thorough enough. But they did what they were supposed to do when they were hired. So constant struggles with money. Board members we have 9 board members, single member district. Everyone's in their own little world. All they care about are the schools in their district. And it was, I was telling Guy, when I got there, it was literally board members would call construction and say, move $3 million from this school over to this school and go ahead and increase the scope on this project. And they would do it, But then when that school came up for their work, the one that lost the $3 million, and they all say, what's going on? Where's my money? I didn't have that board member saying, oh, well, I moved that money over there. You know, they didn't say anything. And my staff was stuck with trying to explain why the money wasn't there. So one thing we did immediately was no more money got moved unless it went to the full board. And we've only taken 2 or 3 things to the board and moved the money, but it really stopped those phone calls from coming over. It was just kind of out of control. And then as we looked, we needed more money to put into our buildings because the deferred maintenance was so bad. And we actually identified things that were in the bond program as far as new schools, additions to schools, management costs. We were paying architects about 12% their fees, and that's just how it always was in Dallas. So we went through, we basically scrubbed a $1.6 billion bond program and identified about $225 million that we could reallocate into these schools and try and get them up to par. Not even close, but at least we're making progress, and we're already talking about the next bond program.
So reevaluating, reprioritizing, and maybe putting a little structure with some sort of execution plan that the board had to unanimously approve changes to.
And it was contentious. I was only there 3 months when I proposed, here's what I want to do, and a part of it was with the program management firms. At first, we looked at just going with an in-house program, and then as we looked at it more and more, we kept the firms. We renegotiated their contracts, which saved us some money. In the process of the renegotiation, it resulted in them reducing their scope of work, and in turn, we hired people in-house to pick up those pieces that the program management firms no longer did. And it saved us money. And like I tell people all the time, it's all about putting the money back into the schools. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to say, look how much money I can save. I want that money into the schools, and we're not even making a dent into what really needs to be done in Dallas ISD.
Anyone else have anything, idea of doing more with less?
Well, this may be contrary to the topic of more with less, but when I was faced with trying to make sure that the powers that be knew that the money needed to stay in the buckets in which they existed, I upped my external communication budget a little bit and put more emphasis on my groundbreaking and ribbon cutting ceremonies. And those are the 2 times where every stakeholder who's involved with the project, whether it be operations, engineers, architects, PMCM, owner, all the way up to the legislature or the governor or the mayor or whomever, board members, everyone is in the same room. And everyone is there willing and wanting to be a part of that great success. Cameras are there, lots of microphones, so it means lots of politicians. Everybody wants to talk about how they were part of that success. And I found that wrapping in that entire group into fairly grand events was a true benefit for the program overall, because it got everyone aligned. It got everyone pulling in the same direction. So while there may be an instance where you would think that would be the first thing to be cut, I think that external communication and building that camaraderie and that group of stakeholders that are solely focused on the mission of how can we expend our money in the most wise and efficient manner to benefit the children has certainly paid benefits for us.
A lot of past sins forgiven at ribbon cuttings.
Very much so.
I have 2 practical things that we started doing. One, we went out for an RFQ for architects. So rather than negotiate fees, we have a sliding scale in there. So if you have a $10 million project, you're getting this percentage. Makes life a lot easier. And then you get your core architects in the city who keep coming back because they know how to do CPS work. So that helps us. And the other thing, again, we have a big deferred maintenance. We don't get a lot of money for the deferred maintenance. We get it for the new schools or the additions. Those are better ribbon cuttings for the mayor. So we try to extend those funds as much as possible. So we've gone into bundling. We found that we have a 20% savings when we bundle 2 or 3 projects together. So those are just 2 practical things we do.
I think we also try and design buildings, work really closely with our facilities and maintenance departments on the building design. And part of that is, this is the more. So take a little bit more time to design the buildings on the capital side, because on the maintenance side, we have to use general fund dollars. So our challenge is right now in Seattle, our budgets are so tight on that side, we do building cleaning once every 3 days. So our classrooms aren't even cleaned every day. We have to go basically they might get twice a week, but once a week. You have certain areas, bathrooms and cafeterias get cleaned every day. But in the design, when we're going through that, we really do think about what's the impact of being able to maintain this design of the building. What can we automate as much as possible so that we can maximize personnel? And then just thinking about some of the designs look really great. You might have a giant glass wall that runs 100 feet. Well, at some point, somebody's got to clean that wall. So it may look good to begin with, and at the ribbon cutting, but a year or two after that, when you get a lot of condensation and other things that happen, you really have to think about what that's going to look like. So we try and devote that time up front and have both departments really talking about how we do this, and then how we're going to maintain that building so that it does provide a very good learning environment. Still looks great, still going to function 10, 20. I mean, we really think about our buildings in the 50 to 80 year timeline.
So you indicated that as a prior superintendent and principal, you had no problem getting the educational vision, but you got the M&O folks too.
I wouldn't say that, but yeah, being on that side, originally started my career as a teacher and then a principal and superintendent of a smaller school district. That's at least part of the vision that I try and bring to both of those departments, is really think about that. And luckily, most of the folks that we have are really good. I think they use their ears and mouth proportionately, meaning they listen twice as much as they talk, which is pretty good. So we do try and bring that vision in design, in maintenance. We have educational directors of schools really involved in a lot of this. Principals are involved, especially at the secondary level. We bring in parents and students to really talk about what's happening within their schools. Currently, we have one of our high schools that hasn't had a renovation probably 50, 60 years. And they're coming to board meetings, every board meeting, advocating for their building. What can you do now? What can you do now? And we have them on our next levy that's coming up in 2019, but they'd love their $60 million renovation now. Unfortunately, we don't have $60 million to start.
Everybody wants it sooner rather than later. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to open it up to some questions. Anything in the field? Yes?
Well, we know that environments matter for kids and education and physical environment. Are you guys doing anything with sort of how your offices are set up that might inspire in terms of protection and improvement? Sort of modeling that collaborative environment?
Well, that is a good question. I would have to answer it honestly by saying no. However, there is the intent to do so. We're sort of bound by the office space available that the state has in certain locations. However, I do mitigate it somewhat by we have a bullpen effect at our PMCM office. So I have, as part of my contract with my PMCM firm, I have them provide temporary office space for members, well, up to maybe 12 members of my team, so that when they're at the PMCM's location, they have a place where they can truly be embedded, and it is very collaborative in nature, wide open, everyone can be there. And it does create a lot of those sort of one-off communications in the hallways, which I'm a big fan of. Most of the Department of Education is much younger than I, and I think they generally tend to be more structured. If it's on the calendar, they'll be there, but if not, sometimes don't knock on the door. I'm the guy who's always knocking on the door. Hey, can I come in? Can I have a quick second? We'll get something done in 2 or 3 minutes instead of scheduling a 30-minute meeting. But I agree that that is something that should be a focus as we go through time.
3 years ago, we moved our headquarters and we downsized and went into a collaborative environment, so we mostly have open office space. And we embedded the facilities team in the education teams. So there's a lot of feedback about, because we're changing, you're hearing about STEM, you're hearing about STEAM, IB, personalized learning. And so we need all those educators' input, so it's a very collaborative environment. It's great, and I can see why it works in schools, because we have benefit in facilities. We're not working in an isolated area. We're hearing what's going on.
I think you had a question?
Yeah, look, you mentioned that you're spending about $500 a square foot for new schools. Could each of you tell me, let's just say a 9-12 in a suburban environment, what is the cost that you're seeing to build a new school like that?
For everyone who didn't hear, thank you.
The question was if they could share how much per square foot they're seeing in their respective areas for building new schools.
New construction, all in, including foundation, about $235 a foot for new construction, averaging about $265 a square foot for historic renovation.
Flip?
So again, our general overall budget is about $500 a square foot, but it can go up, sometimes it can depend on site conditions. I'm a little concerned about some of our upcoming projects. We've got a school being built out close to us. Part of it is they just have to drive a bunch of pin piles down there, so they're at almost $1,000 a square foot. We're hoping not to get to that. Again, most of our sites are pre-existing. We already have a school there. So we do have issues sometimes with historic renovations. That new high school we're opening is historic. It's over 100 years old. We can't do much with it. Yeah, elementary, middle, high school, it all runs about $500 a square foot for us.
Mary?
Well, I'm an urban district, so you're not going to get the suburban costs, but about 3 years ago, we did a 2.5-year study on how to reduce the cost of construction. So construction-wise, we're about $260 a square foot, about $360 all in.
Okay, Flip, cover your ears, all right? We're about between $250 to $350 a square foot. Just depends on the type of the project. And what's interesting with the economy the way it is, you can bid a project one day and it's $250. The same project you bid 2 weeks later and it's $320 for whatever reason. I'm sure it's just resources that are available at the time. But when I started in this, it was $75 a square foot for a building.
Careful. I think there was another question. Let's see, in
Oh.
the back there. Yeah.
We actually are out of time. I'm sorry to
My thing says
cut
one more
everybody
minute.
off.
Okay.
But okay, one more question. We'll
Go ahead.
If we could just talk about millennials for a second, it seems to be the hot topic, and I live in New York City, they're like rats, they're everywhere. Show up at 10 o'clock in the
How many
morning.
millennials in the room?
Yeah, exactly. Don't get insulted. But they're very disruptive to the workforce for me because they are capable of doing things that most people that are already working for us can't do. So does anybody have any stories about the integration of millennials into the workforce, whether it's successful or not, and what we can do to make that better?
I tend to go to them to have them explain Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. John, for me, that's their greatest inherent value.
Anybody else have anything there?
Well, most millennials, you're going to get them for about a year, and then they're going to move on to another job. So do the best you can. And I think the thing with millennials, you've got to engage them and let them build programs because they lose interest really quick, and they just move on.
Okay, I think our time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.